Imagine, just for a second, that you've survived the unimaginable. I mean, you've walked through literal minefields. You've
Sure.
breathed in the toxic air of military burn pits. You've faced just the visceral trauma of war, and you made it out the other side.
Yeah, you survived the absolute worst of it.
Exactly. And then, after all that high-stakes survival, your entire career, like your whole identity is completely destroyed by a parked car.
It's just a staggering contradiction. The explosive threats don't take you out, but the mundane reality totally does.
It's wild. Welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. We are jumping right into the heart of the source material you shared with us, the Tularosa Perimeter, a forensic reconstruction.
Specifically, we're looking at part 3, the disintegration.
Right, chapter 7 and 8. And our mission today is to explore this incredibly jarring, just painful transition from a highly structured military identity to complete civilian exile.
Yeah, we're really looking at what happens when a highly trained individual just hits rock bottom.
And the fascinating kind of unconventional way they're pulled back from the brink, right? So let's set the stage here. Looking at the opening of this section, we start right at the moment of impact, but we aren't in a war zone. What's the scene?
Right, so we are on a quiet street in Bamberg, Germany. It's 1998, and Alexander Thorne's military career is coming to just a violently abrupt halt.
Yeah.
The source material paints this really bleak, sensory-heavy picture of the military police station. So Thorne is handcuffed to a metal bench,
Oh, man.
and there are these fluorescent lights overhead buzzing, and that electric hum is syncing up perfectly with this cicada-like tinnitus that's constantly ringing in his head.
The details in the text are just so intense. I mean, it mentions he smells like stale beer and vomit. Like, what led to this exact moment?
Well, Thorne was trying to drink away a horrific memory from his deployment. The text actually calls it a red mist memory.
A redness memory. Wow.
Yeah, it's an image of a civilian stepping on a landmine back at McGovern base in Bosnia. So he was attempting to, erase the imagery of physics, just dismantling a human being.
Just trying to numb it all.
Exactly. And in that desperate attempt to numb his own mind, he gets behind the wheel and crashes his car into 3 civilian parked cars.
And then Captain Miller walks in. And from the notes, Miller's assessment of the situation is brutally blunt.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm.
He signs the release paperwork and reminds Thorne of the supreme irony of the whole situation.
Right.
Miller essentially says, look, you survived 2 tours in Bosnia, you survived the Saudi burn pits, and this is how you go out, a DUI.
And Thorne's response is just chilling. He whispers, I close my eyes and I see the ground exploding.
Yeah, it really shows where his head is at.
But wait, let me push back on this for a second, because Thorne has survived all this trauma, right? He is clearly suffering from severe psychological wounds from the line of duty.
Right, absolutely.
And the Army's response is to just discard him over a crashed car. I mean, isn't the military supposed to take care of its own? Like, was the Army in the wrong here?
Well, that's kind of the eternal tension within military bureaucracy. They have a dual burden.
Right.
Yes, they have a responsibility to the soldier, but their primary directive is maintaining absolute discipline, order, and safety. A soldier who's crashing vehicles into civilian property is, well, a massive liability.
I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, the military machinery just does not pause for trauma when order is threatened. So 2 weeks later, Thorne is facing an Article 15 hearing.
Okay, for those of us who aren't familiar with military justice, what does an Article 15 actually mean?
So it's a form of non-judicial punishment, meaning Thorne doesn't get a full court-martial with a jury of his peers. The battalion commander acts as judge and jury.
Wow, okay.
And the author highlights a really heartbreaking contrast during this scene. Thorne is standing at attention in front of the battalion commander's desk, which is made of this highly polished wood.
Right.
And it's so utterly different from the rough plywood of the deployments, where Thorne actually sacrificed his physical and mental health.
It feels like the ultimate bureaucratic finality. Just, you're done.
It is. It's April 1998, just 5 months after returning from his second Bosnia tour, and the commander reads the sentence. Specialist Thorne is reduced to the rank of Private E1,
Oh, wow.
and he's discharged with a general under honorable conditions characterization.
I really want to understand the real-world stakes of that specific discharge. Because the phrase, under honorable conditions, it sounds okay to a civilian ear, right? Why is this such a devastating blow?
Well, because in the military ecosystem, a general discharge is a lingering stain.
Ah.
It means you don't get the full spectrum of benefits associated with an honorable discharge. It can impact your GI Bill, meaning your educational funding is suddenly gone or restricted.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah, and it raises immediate red flags for any future civilian employers. It essentially communicates to Thorne, you were good enough to go to war, but your character isn't good enough to stay in peace.
Man. And the physical action the commander takes next is what really gives me emotional whiplash reading it.
Yeah, the patch.
Exactly. He stands up, reaches out, and physically rips the Velcro E4 rank patch off Thorne's chest. The text notes the sound of the tearing fabric is loud in the quiet office.
It's a ceremonial stripping of identity, literally tearing it away.
Which brings me to a massive question. How does a human psyche handle that? Going from a high-speed NATO standard mine clear to a civilian outcast overnight.
Right.
It's like taking a finely tuned Formula One car, running it through a grueling demolition derby, and then throwing away the keys because, I don't know, the bumper got dented. Where does all that trained intensity go?
To understand that, we really have to look at the psychological concept of a container.
A container?
Yeah. For someone like Thorne, who's been exposed to extreme compounded trauma, the military itself acted as an exoskeleton.
Oh, interesting.
The rigid structure, the chain of command, the constant operational tempo that was the container holding his unraveling mind together.
So the uniform was literally holding the panic in.
Exactly.
Ah.
When the Army instantly cuts the line, they don't just take his job. They remove his container. They strip away the very walls that were keeping the flashbacks and the severe physical symptoms at bay.
Leaving him totally exposed.
Right. He is left entirely exposed to his own mind without any of the architectural support the military provided. It's a psychological freefall.
Okay, so his military container shatters.
Hmm.
But you don't just, cease to exist when you're discharged. Where does a 24-year-old with a broken psyche actually go?
Well, stripped of his rank and purpose, Thorne retreats from that polished military world into the ultimate symbol of civilian stagnation. He moves into his parents' suburban basement in Maryland.
And the author uses a brilliant sensory shift here. We move from the smell of cordite and burning trash pits to the smell of fabric softener and dehumidifiers.
Yeah, it really highlights how alien a safe civilian environment feels to a mind that's still wired for combat. At 24 years old, Thorne is lying on a pull-out couch, just staring at the ceiling joists. He is actively hiding from the neighbors because they want to ask about the returning hero.
And he can't bear the shame of telling them he was busted down to an E1 and kicked out. It sounds like total paralysis. But then the text says the stairs creak. Who steps in here?
This is where we meet the rescuer. Petty Officer First Class, retired, Robert Thorne, Alexander's father.
The source mentions his background in the Navy, specifically as an AW1. Can you unpack what that actually means? Like, what was Robert's operating environment?
Sure. So Robert was an aviation warfare systems operator. For 20 years, his entire job was sitting in the back of P-3 Orion aircraft.
Okay.
These are 4-engine turboprops designed for maritime patrol. He spent hours in a dark aluminum tube staring at acoustic screens, dropping sonobuoys into the ocean, and listening for the magnetic anomalies of Soviet submarines hidden deep underwater.
Wow.
As the text notes, his entire professional life was dedicated to finding things that didn't want to be found.
I love that line. It's so evocative. So Robert comes down the stairs, and he tells his son he's burning daylight.
Right.
Robert points out the harsh difference in the service cultures. He says the Navy would have thrown Alex in the brig for the DUI, sure, but they wouldn't have just kicked him out. He tells him, we don't leave people stranded on the beach.
It is a crucial moment of validation. Robert acknowledges the failure.
Mm-hmm.
He tells Alex he messed up and is lucky he didn't kill anyone,
Yeah.
but he immediately pivots to loyalty.
Yeah.
He establishes that Alex is on the beach now and Robert is initiating an extraction.
I want to pause on Robert's approach here. The father is looking at his son with the exact same expression he would use for a false sonar contact, disappointed, but entirely focused on a technical solution.
Yes, exactly.
He doesn't offer a hug. He doesn't ask Alex to share his feelings. On paper, that sounds incredibly cold, maybe even damaging to someone in a severe mental health crisis. Why doesn't he take a more emotionally supportive route?
Because Robert intuitively understands his son's current operating system. Alex's brain is wired strictly for threat detection, logistics, and military logic.
So empathy wouldn't compute.
Right. If Robert came down there with traditional emotional comforting, if he tried to unpack Alex's feelings about the discharge, it would feel completely alien to Alex. In fact, it might even register as an attack or a threat because vulnerable emotion was a liability in a minefield.
So leaning into the feelings would just be more noise.
It would be static.
Yeah.
Robert bypasses the emotional minefield entirely. He speaks to Alex soldier to sailor.
Wow.
By addressing the breakdown as an operational failure rather than a moral failing, he bypasses Alex's profound shame.
That makes so much sense.
Right, because a moral failure means you are a bad person. An operational failure just means the system broke down and needs to be repaired. It's a language Alex can process without triggering his defensive reflexes.
But if they aren't talking about feelings, how do they communicate what Alex is actually going through? Because in this scene, Alex confesses to his dad, I feel like I'm still vibrating, like the engine is still running.
And Robert responds with a perfect sonar metaphor. He taps his temple and calls it the sensor ghost.
Sensor ghost.
Yeah. Robert reveals that he himself used to hear acoustic pings in his sleep for years after he retired from the Navy. He tells Alex, you spent years looking for things that go boom. Your gain is turned up too high. You need to recalibrate.
That phrase, your gain is turned up too high, is such a brilliant, non-judgmental way to explain hypervigilance. Psychologically speaking, why does framing it as a mechanical issue work better than, say, giving him a medical diagnosis?
Well, think about how we pathologize trauma. When you tell a 24-year-old veteran they have a psychological disorder, it feels like a life sentence.
Right, like something is permanently wrong with you.
Exactly. It implies they're permanently broken. But by calling it a sensor ghost and talking about the gain being too high, Robert turns trauma into an engineering problem.
He validates the physical reality of the ringing and the buzzing. He's basically saying, you aren't crazy, your hardware is just miscalibrated for a Maryland basement.
Let's look at the neurology of what is actually happening.
Yeah.
Alex's amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for threat detection, is stuck in overdrive.
Yeah.
His sympathetic nervous system is constantly pumping adrenaline. If you turn the sensitivity on a microphone all the way up to gainfall, it will pick up a pin drop and amplify it into a deafening screech.
Ouch. Yeah.
Alex's brain is doing exactly what it was trained to do. It's amplifying every sound, every shadow, to find anti-tank mines in the mud of the Sada River. Framing it this way assures Alex it's a normal mechanical glitch of his past training. It gives him a tangible mechanical goal recalibration.
But a diagnosis doesn't get you off the couch, though. I mean, an engineer needs a mission. How does Robert actually initiate this recalibration and shift Alex from this static, shrinking basement back into the active world?
He provides the logistics. Robert tosses Alex the keys to an extraction vehicle. But it's not military hardware. It is a beat-up 1992 Ford Ranger with high miles and a slipping transmission.
And a massive downgrade from what Alex is used to. I mean, in Bosnia, a vehicle meant an M60 Panther or an M113 personnel carrier. It meant armor and life or death.
Right, but handing him the keys to a civilian truck is a necessary downgrade in threat level. It is the first step in lowering that game.
Yeah.
And then Robert gives him the mission, a job delivering for a Pizza Hut on Route 40.
Which Alex naturally scoffs at. He has this moment of bitter resistance where he reminds his dad that he was clearing anti-tank mines a month ago, and now he's expected to deliver pepperoni. I completely get his frustration. It feels pretty demeaning.
Well, for sure.
Yeah.
But Robert shuts that ego down immediately with a sharp correction. He tells him, you're delivering reliability, Alex. He explains that Alex needs a routine. He says, right now, your perimeter is this basement, and it's shrinking. The instruction is simple. Get out, drive the truck, drop off the food, come back. You reestablish a baseline.
And then Robert issues the order to execute. Shower, shave, pick up the truck at 1400. And Alex just says, roger that, slipping right back into his vernacular.
Exactly.
I really want to dig into the mechanics of this. The source calls it a logistical supply chain mission. But what is actually happening in his brain when he's driving this pizza route?
Robert is successfully hacking his son's psychology. He knows Alex is suffering from severe anxiety and the beginnings of agoraphobia, the fear of leaving a safe environment.
Right.
If Robert had suggested Alex go to a therapist and practice driving around the block to face his fears, Alex would have totally balked. Instead, Robert tricks Alex into performing rigorous exposure therapy by dressing it up as a logistical mission.
Exposure therapy disguised as logistics. That's genius. How does the route itself change his brain?
Well, exposure therapy relies on systematic desensitization. The rigid rules of a pizza delivery franchise provide a predictable feedback loop. You have a 30-minute guarantee, a specific routing protocol, a known payload. By driving a familiar, defined loop, Alex's brain learns that the environment is safe. His cortisol levels slowly begin to drop because the predictable mechanics driving the route, minimizing left turns, returning to base, they mimic the structure of the military without the lethal threat.
The actual mechanics are exactly the same.
Right. And what is truly profound in the source text is how this job shapes his future. The author notes that the future 15-mile limit of Alex's panic disorder, the geographical boundary he eventually cannot cross without having a complete system failure, will be defined by the exact delivery radius of this pizza store.
Oh, wow.
This route quite literally draws the map of his surviving world. It provides the new safe container for his mind.
Taking a step back, the journey across these two chapters is incredible. I mean, we watch Alexander Thorne hit absolute pavement. He was stripped of his rank, his pride, and his uniform in a polished office in Germany.
Yeah.
He retreated into the silent, shrinking perimeter of a suburban basement, just waiting for the static in his head to consume him.
But thanks to a father who spent his life tracking things that don't want to be found, Alex is located in the dark. He's given a diagnosis that makes sense to a soldier, a sensor ghost, a gain turned too high. He's given a beat-up Ford Ranger and a new set of coordinates.
The service industry becomes his new battlefield. He goes from proofing lanes for landmines to proofing routes for pepperoni, and in doing so, he begins to build a new container.
It's amazing.
It really is a powerful reminder that survival isn't always about grand, heroic gestures. Sometimes survival is just finding a reason to put the key in the ignition and drive a 5-mile loop until the panic subsides.
It's about finding the appropriate mechanics to process the trauma, and finding a watchstander in your life willing to speak your specific language to pull you out of the dark.
Which brings me to you, listening right now. We all face moments in our lives where our container breaks. It might not be a military discharge.
No, usually not.
Right. It could be losing a job that defined you, the end of a long-term relationship, or a sudden shift in your identity that leaves you feeling exposed and static in your own metaphorical basement. When your exoskeleton shatters, how do you build a new perimeter to protect yourself? What are the small, repetitive logistics you can use to reestablish your own baseline?
You have to identify your own Ford Ranger, your own Route 40.
Exactly. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over long after this deep dive ends. We talked about how Robert Thorne normalized his son's trauma by calling it a sensor ghost, the lingering mechanical echoes of a past environment where the threat level was turned up to the maximum. If we all carry sensor ghosts from the high-stress moments of our own pasts, are the phantom pings we hear today just echoes of old wars? Or are they trying to tell us something vital about the baselines we are accepting right now?
A really powerful question to consider.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Tularosa Perimeter. We'll be waiting for you at the next set of coordinates.